What if your worst enemy was once your closest ally? Once secret partners, now bitter enemies. Israel and Iran are on the edge of all-out war. From spy missions to missile strikes, this is more than a conflict. It's a global powder keg. Stay with us as we unravel a story that spans decades and could ignite the world. Imagine Israel selling missiles to Iran, while the Shah and Mossad walked hand in glove. At first glance, it sounds like fiction, but from the shadows of the Cold War, an unlikely alliance was born. In the 1950s, Iran under Shah Mohammad Reza Pahlavi was not an enemy of Israel. It was one of its most valuable partners. United by fear of rising Arab nationalism and Soviet influence, the two nations forged a secret but powerful partnership. The Shah saw Israel as a Western-aligned stronghold in a turbulent region, while Israel saw Iran as a gateway to energy, intelligence, and influence. Behind closed doors, Mossad agents trained Savak, Iran's feared internal security force responsible for tracking, torturing, and eliminating opposition. Intelligence flowed freely between Tel Aviv and Tehran. Israeli engineers flew into Iran under diplomatic shadows, working quietly on joint weapons projects. One of the most secretive, Project Flower, a covert missile development program. Israel would provide the designs, Iran the funding. The result? A missile prototype meant to rival regional threats. In exchange, Israel gained billions in oil shipments at favorable prices, fueling its economy in a hostile neighborhood. It was a secret alliance hidden beneath layers of deniability, built not on shared values, but on shared enemies. But everything was about to change. A storm was brewing in Iran, one that would turn ally into enemy and rewrite the balance of the Middle East. Upheaval. Then, overnight, saints became demons. The year was 1979. The streets of Tehran trembled with chants, fire, and fury. Decades of royal rule collapsed as millions demanded change, not reform, but revolution. From exile, Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini returned to a hero's welcome, carried by the tides of Islamic fervor and anti-Western rage. The Shah fled, the monarchy crumbled, and with it, so did the secret alliance that had once bound Israel and Iran together in shadow. In Khomeini's new Islamic Republic, Israel was no longer a partner. It was the little Satan, second only to America, the great Satan. What had been a covert friendship turned overnight into open hostility. Iranian television showed Palestinian children under Israeli occupation. The new regime declared Zionism a global threat to Islam. Embassies were shut, flags were burned, treaties erased like dust. Iran threw its support behind the Palestinian cause, opening its doors to Yasser Arafat and leaders of militant resistance. Where once Mossad had advised Tehran's secret police, now Iran trained and armed groups committed to Israel's destruction. The lines were drawn. No more oil shipments, no more intelligence sharing, no more silence. The revolution had not only upended Iran, it had shattered a fragile regional balance. And in its place, something far more dangerous was rising. A 40-year shadow war fought not through armies, but through spies, militias, and ideology. Proxy wars begin. They didn't fight face to face. They fought by proxy. With no official war declared, the battlefield shifted into the shadows. After the revolution, Iran realized it didn't need tanks or troops to threaten Israel. It needed proxies, quiet partners, invisible hands. In Lebanon, Iran backed the rise of Hezbollah, a Shiite militia turned political powerhouse that vowed to drive Israel out of southern Lebanon. In Gaza, Iran funneled funds and weapons to Hamas, turning a grassroots resistance into a regional force. In Iraq and Syria, it armed and trained Shiite militias to undermine Israeli influence and entrench its own. And Israel? Israel struck back with silence and precision. No speeches, no declarations, just action. Targeted airstrikes against Iranian weapons convoys in Syria. Assassinations of nuclear scientists deep inside Iranian cities. Cyber attacks that crippled centrifuges without a single missile fired. Each blow was a message. We are watching. We are everywhere. It became a game of shadows, silent but deadly. The two nations never looked each other in the eye, but their fingerprints were all over the region's violence. Civil wars, Political chaos and sectarian bloodshed became the new normal. And though neither flag flew openly in battle, the war was very much alive, fought through others, paid in lives, and justified by belief. The Middle East was no longer just a region. It had become a chessboard, and Iran and Israel were the grandmasters of destruction. The proxy collapse. Even Iran's proxies are starting to back away. For decades, Tehran's power didn't end at its borders. It reached into Lebanon, Gaza, Yemen, and beyond. A shadow empire of armed groups, trained, funded, and loyal. But now the shadow is fading. In southern Lebanon, Hezbollah loses high-ranking commanders to Israeli drone strikes. Their safe houses no longer safe, their movements tracked. What was once Tehran's strongest ally is now on the defensive. In Gaza, Hamas faces the same fate, cornered, cut off, crumbling from within. The Israeli army's operation choked their supply lines. Missiles fail. Morale cracks. In Yemen, the Houthis are bombed relentlessly, not by Israel, but by American jets. The U.S. unleashes precision strikes after repeated attacks on Red Sea shipping routes. The Houthis, once proud to fly Iran's banner, now retreat into the mountains. Iran's long arm is bleeding. Its once coordinated proxy network is fracturing under pressure. Loyalty turns to self-preservation. The ideology fades when the missiles stop working and the coffins keep coming home. Tehran grows more isolated. Its reach is shrinking. Its message is dimming. The war hasn't just battered Iran's cities, it's shattered its influence. And the world sees it. For the first time in decades, Iran's grip on the region is slipping. Tehran in flames. Imagine millions of lives paused as sirens wail over Tehran. The heart of Iran, the capital, the cultural core, is now a battlefield. Within hours of Israel's counterstrike, Tehran's skyline flickers with distant blasts. Air raid sirens howl through the dense smog. Jets screech overhead. Windows shatter. Communications go dark. The city of nearly 9 million people is paralyzed. Over 100,000 civilians flee the capital. Families pile into old cars, gripping suitcases, babies, and prayer beads. Roads clog. Gas runs out. Cell towers jam. Supermarkets are emptied in hours. Bread, rice, medicine, all gone. Hospitals are overrun, not just with the wounded, but with the panicked. Doctors work by flashlight, blood runs short, the dead are wrapped in blankets. But the suffering doesn't stop the war. Inside the regime's bunkers, generals plot, ministers preach. The leadership grows more defiant, calling for vengeance, not retreat. And on the streets of Tehran, something darker brews. Fear turns to fury. Fury at Israel, but also at their own government. Why weren't they protected? Why didn't diplomacy work? In hushed tones, in private homes, people begin to whisper the unthinkable. Is this the price of the nuclear dream? But for now, the regime digs in, tightening control, silencing dissent, and vowing revenge. Outside, the skyline of Tehran burns softly in the distance. The war is no longer at the border. The war is here. Skies of war. Israel flew F-35s over Tehran, unseen until the bombs fell, invisible, undetectable. The world's most advanced stealth fighter jet, the F-35 Adir, cut through Iranian skies like ghosts. By the time Tehran heard the first explosion, the planes were already gone. Runways, radar systems, missile launchers, command centers, gone in minutes. Precision, speed, silence. Iran's air defenses, once feared, crumbled. S-300 batteries failed to lock on. Command posts went dark. Israeli pilots returned home without a scratch. But this wasn't a one-sided war. From deep inside hardened bunkers, Iran unleashed another wave of terror. Hundreds of missiles fired across the region, many toward Tel Aviv. That night, the Iron Dome lit the sky like a fireworks display. Interceptors streaking upward, trying to catch death midair. Most missiles were stopped, but not all. One missile punched through and struck a quiet apartment block in southern Tel Aviv. The building collapsed. A mother, a father, and 2 children killed instantly. No military, just a family. Sirens wailed, dust choked the air. Neighbors dug with bare hands. Grief turned into rage. And across Israel, the question became clear. How long can we keep this up? How many lives until it ends or gets worse? In Iran, they celebrated resistance. In Israel, they mourned innocence. The skies were now battlegrounds. and the war was no longer controlled. Stealing an entire nuclear archive? That's not a movie. That's 2018. It sounds like a Hollywood script. Black-clad agents breaking into a high-security vault in the heart of Tehran, slipping out with a treasure trove of secrets. But this was no film. This was real. In early 2018, the Israeli intelligence agency Mossad pulled off one of the most daring spy operations in modern history. In a covert overnight raid, agents infiltrated a secret warehouse, extracted over 50,000 documents and hundreds of CDs, all tied to Iran's long-denied nuclear weapons program. The files included blueprints, timelines, photographs, and missile schematics, evidence that contradicted everything Iran had claimed for years. Just months later, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu stood before the world and unveiled the archive to global media. He held up the documents, looked into the camera, and declared, "Iran lied." The revelation shook global diplomacy. For the West, it was proof that Iran's nuclear ambitions hadn't vanished. They'd gone underground. For Israel, it was justification for years of silent strikes and sabotage. But Iran responded with fire and denial. Officials claimed the files were fake, staged, misunderstood. The world was once again divided between those who saw a threat in Iran's secrecy and those who feared Israel's growing boldness. And in that divide, the tension grew louder. The line between war and warning was getting thinner by the day. Direct confrontation. In 2024, Iran punched back hard. For decades, the war stayed in the shadows, but in 2024, it exploded into daylight. April, July, October, 3 separate waves. Iran launched barrages of missiles and drones at Israeli cities, shattering the illusion that distance still offered safety. Tehran named it Operation True Promise, a declaration that retaliation had finally come. Sirens wailed across Tel Aviv. Explosions lit the sky. Civilian lives were upended in seconds. It wasn't just a military strike, it was a message. We're not hiding anymore. And Israel? Israel answered with fury. Within hours, warplanes roared into Syrian and Iraqi airspace. Precision strikes leveled Iranian weapons depots, training bases, and command centers used by Tehran's elite Quds force. Entire compounds were reduced to rubble. Israel's message was just as loud. You may strike us, but we will strike you deeper. The world watched in silence. Shocked, then afraid. The conflict had evolved. No longer a chess match of proxy forces. No longer whispers in digital corridors. This was direct confrontation. Two nations now lashing out in broad daylight, dragging the region closer to the edge of all-out war. In 2024, the mask of deniability came off, and the powder keg was officially lit. The cost of victory. What if winning still feels like losing? The headlines declare it. Iran's nuclear sites crippled. Reactors in Natanz, Fort Al, Iraq, reduced to rubble. Mission accomplished? Not quite. The skies are quiet, but the air is thick with smoke. In Israel, sirens fall silent for the first time in weeks, but the grief remains deafening. Over 3,000 civilians dead. Entire neighborhoods in Tel Aviv, Haifa, and Ashkelon gone. Hospitals overflow. Cemeteries expand. In Iran, cities lie in ruin. Tehran still smolders. Over 10,000 dead. Power grids shattered. Internet dark. Families torn apart. And the nuclear threat? Yes, it's been delayed, but not destroyed. Iran still has the knowledge, the scientists, the will, and worst of all, the anger. This wasn't victory. It was survival. The global markets remain shaken. Oil is unstable. Refugees pour into Turkey, Jordan, even Europe. Diplomats speak of peace, but their eyes say otherwise. And in the quiet aftermath, one truth becomes clear. There are no winners in this war, only survivors, carrying scars too deep to measure. Global tremors. The Middle East is burning and the world is sweating. What began as a regional conflict now ripples across the globe. Markets spiral, borders tighten, fear spreads faster than missiles. Overnight, oil soars to $200 a barrel. Gas lines form in London. Factories slow in Germany. Flights are grounded in India. The global economy chokes, held hostage by the war between two nations 1,000 miles apart. Stock markets plunge in New York, Tokyo, Dubai. Traders stare at red screens while oil executives and diplomats huddle behind closed doors. And then the Americans step in. US B-52 bombers flying from bases in Qatar and Diego Garcia strike Iranian weapons convoys in Syria and Iraq. The Pentagon calls it limited intervention. Tehran calls it an act of war. The stakes have never been higher. From the White House, the President of the United States speaks in stark, chilling terms. This war must not go nuclear. We will defend our allies, but we will not let this escalate into global annihilation. His voice is calm, but his message is clear. We are one misstep away from catastrophe. The world watches, frozen. Diplomats sprint between capitals. Protesters flood streets. Satellites track every missile launch, every troop movement, every shadow. The fuse is burning, and no one knows how long is left. The future unwritten ceasefire, but not peace. After weeks of bloodshed, a fragile ceasefire is signed, brokered in Washington, whispered through Geneva. Neither side smiles, neither side shakes hands. There's no treaty, no justice, no closure, just silence, laced with tension. Israeli jets stay fueled. Iranian missiles stay armed. The world doesn't exhale, it holds its breath. Cameras leave the front lines, but satellites never blink. The next flash in the sky could start the next war. This isn't the end of the story. It's just the pause between chapters. And somewhere in the shadows, the countdown has already begun.